Since the first case of COVID-19 was reported, world economies have slowed down and others shutting down altogether. However, with the disease passing its peak in certain countries or certain continents, for example, Europe, the process of reopening economies has begun. Question is, how do you do it without risking a second wave of infection? And how do you inject vibrancy back into the economy? Hello there and welcome to Metropole Debrief. On the 22nd of March, Health Cabinet Secretary announced the closure of pubs in the country, allowing restaurants to serve takeaway meals. However, with the 7 p.m. curfew restrictions and work-from-home directive, many restaurants opted to shut down business altogether due to few or no customers. However, with the livelihoods of many threatened and a slowdown in the economy, President Kenyatta announced the government's consideration to allow sectors such as hospitality back into business.
We shall allow a few restaurants and eateries in selected counties that show the highest levels of health regulation compliance and the ability to arrange for employee testing to undertake minimal operations while maintaining measures that mitigate against the spread of coronavirus. The Cabinet Secretary of Health will in due course be announcing and release the protocols that we shall expect these facilities to abide by.
Health Cabinet Secretary Mutahi Kagwe rolled out a set of protocol that restaurants must adhere to in order to go back to business. The guidelines include high standards of hygiene and observance of social distancing rules in restaurants.
Anybody walking into a restaurant must wash their hands first. They must sanitize themselves. They must have a mask. And more seriously, is that restaurants that are going to open with people who have been tested, who are going to be COVID-free. So if your persons have not been tested, you cannot open a restaurant because it is very possible then for a person serving there to spread the disease amongst all customers who walk in.
One of the directives that has caused uncertainty is the need to test all staff of coronavirus before restaurants reopen. While the government has allowed room for restaurant staff to get tested in private hospitals, hoteliers say it will be a costly endeavor.
On average size restaurants will have probably, let's say, 20 employees. Now, each test of COVID in Kenya is, I'm told, about 10,000 to 12,000 shillings. Now, for 20 employees, that's about 200,000 shillings. Now, in a situation where we have zero revenues and rentals and salaries to pay, I am not sure how many restaurants will be able to afford this kind of an expense at this point in time.
Reopening of restaurants is the first step towards the reopening of Kenya's economy. However, relevant stakeholders are caught between the net of health and safety vis-a-vis making profit. Let's now briefly look at some of the countries that have been able to reopen and inject vibrancy back into their economies or are trying to do so. We begin in Europe, Germany, where on the 20th of March, Germany began a slow and cautious reopening of its economy by allowing small shops to go back into operation. Now, the reopening has been under strict hygiene protocols. Small shops are required to enforce social distancing rules by ensuring customers maintain safe distance of about 1.5 meters between them as they go about their shopping. Now, further, Germans are required to mandatorily wear a mask while going outside. Now, what has been the effect of that shutdown? The shutdown of small businesses in Germany due to coronavirus has so far brought losses worth $33 billion, with many businesses struggling financially and others filing for bankruptcy. German Chancellor Angela Merkel's government pumped 1 trillion euros into the economy to aid small and struggling businesses. Also, in line with relaxing the restrictions, all the children in Germany will be allowed to resume school meals in order to prepare for their exams. Now let's take a look at another country, which is Spain. Now Spain is one of the hardest hit countries by coronavirus in Europe, and not just Europe but the world over. Now key sectors such as manufacturing and construction are gradually going back to business, while Italy is also allowing reopening of small shops in areas that have not been severely affected by the virus. Now the first phase of lifting the lockdown on business activity in Spain will officially begin on the 4th of March. It will allow restaurants to, 4th of May. It will allow restaurants to reopen for takeaway, and gyms for individual training sessions and also training for professional athletes will be allowed. Under the next phase, small businesses can open, but with one person inside a store at a time, though big shopping malls will open later in the year. Hotels and apartments for tourists will also be allowed to operate. Now, good news for Spaniards, they will be allowed to move around in their own regions. Churches can also open to provided they are not full to capacity. So this is good news for people in Europe, because we know Europe for a long time has been the disease epicenter. Italy, Spain have been on lockdown for a long time, and they've really seen the horror of coronavirus, recording deaths of up to 700 a day. But now they're past their off-peak and the numbers are stabilizing. Now that's Europe. How about Africa? So let's take a look at home. Let's start with Kenya. Hotels will be allowed back into business for as long as they provide running water and 70% alcohol-based hand sanitizers. Tables must be at least 1.5 meters apart, and all hotel staff must be tested of COVID-19 before they resume business to limit chances of infecting their customers. Further, restaurants must close by 4 p.m. to allow their staff to get home early before the curfew hours, which starts at 7 p.m. every single day for the next 21 days. As a result of COVID-19, GDP growth in Kenya is expected to contract significantly. Now, the Central Bank of Kenya revised its estimate for 2020 from the initial 6.2% to 3.4%. Further, CBK believes that this is still an optimistic assumption and is looking at a sub-3% growth this year, with McKinsey and Company having already placed growth expectations for Kenya at 1.9% in a recent report analyzing the impact of coronavirus in Africa. That is the East African region, Kenya. How about South? Let's take a look at South Africa, which is one of the countries in Africa that also has the highest numbers, particularly in the southern region. Now, the South African government will allow sales of winter clothing, bedding, and heating as the nation enters their winter seasons. Also, mines are resuming operations, and automotive manufacturing can ramp up to half their full capacity. This is according to South Africa's Trade and Industry Minister, Ibrahim Patel. In the loosened lockdown starting the 1st of May, sales of tobacco products will be allowed, and that exercises that isn't undertaken in groups or in buildings such as gyms will be reintroduced. So this is good news for South Africans. At least they can go for a run. Now, the pandemic and a lockdown that came into effect on the 27th of March in South Africa to contain the spread of the coronavirus has compounded the nation's woes, with the Central Bank of South Africa anticipating a 6.1% contraction in gross domestic product just this year. Now, Economic Work Group Business for South Africa projects there could be 1 million job losses. Take a minute and let those numbers sink in. South Africa might lose 1 million jobs. For Kenya, our economy might contract to about 1.9% vis-a-vis the expected growth of 2020 that was 6.2%. The world has been under siege of coronavirus since January, when the first case of coronavirus was confirmed world over, and the World Health Organization declared coronavirus a public health emergency, and hence a global health pandemic when it spread to very many countries across the world. But this is our new normal. The disease looks like it's not going anywhere anytime soon. Even in countries that we are seeing they've been able to clear their cases, we are seeing a resurgence of cases because people are traveling into your country, importation of cases, and there are also cases of a second wave of infection. So how do we adapt to the new normal? How do we go back to reopening our economy and ensure that citizens are able to put food on their table, take care of the bills, and live a decent life? After the break, Enoch Monari helps us put that into context.